von daher, ich kann zwar hier sagen, was mir nicht passt, aber das wird sich dadurch ändern.
Die ganz praktische Antwort lieferte der Bundespräsident: Wählen gehen. Eine Möglichkeit in der Demokratie, Einfluss zu nehmen.
Die Flüchtlingspolitik hat auch den Wahlkampf in Sachsen-Anhalt bestimmt.
What's wrong with our democracy? If we take a look at voter turnout at the Bundestag elections since 1949, something just doesn't seem right. Is a democracy where only 70% of the population goes to vote really still democratic? The Konrad Adenauer Stiftung has done research on why fewer and fewer people are voting. Most non-voters aren't voting because they somehow feel that their vote isn't making any difference. Only few refuse to vote in general. But has anything really changed in the profiles of Germany's biggest parties since the 70s? As time passed, many people simply no longer felt like any of these parties could represent their political interests in the Bundestag. But why is that? To answer this question, let's take a look back at the history of democracy. In its early forms, the question of representation revolved around who should be represented and who should be a representative. Today we focus a lot more on the latter. We fixate on candidates themselves rather than their values and policies. But shouldn't the question of what is being represented be most important of all? Professor Andranik Tangyan studies voting behavior and representativeness with a group of students at the KIT. In his paper, he has concluded irrational voting behavior through his examination of the 2013 German Bundestag election.
Since late 90s, there exist in internet so-called voting advice applications. These applications were originally designed as political education tool. The aim was to help young people locate themselves on the political landscape and to advise which party could represent policy preferences of the user.
By evaluating the responses of all Valomat users and comparing these to the answers given by the parties, a popularity index can be calculated for each party. This index shows the correlation between voters' opinions and the individual parties. Surprisingly, the biggest and most established parties had the poorest values on this index. The CDU came in last, even though they have by far the largest section of seats in the Bundestag. This shows that people are voting irrationally. For example, many people vote for the CDU even though the party does not best represent their political preferences.
The study on the German Bundestag election proves that the third vote concept could really make a difference. The results really shocked us and made us wonder how this idea could be applied. We also questioned the accuracy of the results since the users of the Valomat are predominantly younger people, which could distort the results. It was exactly this discussion about distortion that motivated us to apply the alternative election method in an experiment. This July, the KIT here in Karlsruhe held the annual student parliament elections. It was actually perfect for our experiment because it worked just like the Bundestag, where there is a first vote given to parties and a second vote for candidates. We even have a voting advice application just for the student parliament called the Stupa-O-Mat. Luckily, the student union was on board with our idea quickly and gave us the go-ahead to conduct our experiment during this election.
Nachdem uns die Idee halt erklärt worden ist, fanden wir das sehr spannend und das ist wirklich sehr also zukunftsweisend, mal auch solche grundlegenden Demokratiegedanken mal zu hinterfragen und Wahlsysteme zu ändern.
So for the experiment, we introduced a third vote that consisted of 10 statements from the Stupa-O-Mat, where the voter can check agree, disagree, or take a neutral position, just like in a voting advice application.
Also ich finde es sehr interessant, dieses Drittstimmen-Experiment, einfach weil ich glaube, dass es schon einiges ändern kann. Weil ich glaube, dass viele Leute nach Gesicht wählen, nach, ach, ich sehe, der ist gerade in der gleichen Studiengang wie ich. Ich glaube, das ist schon was ganz anderes.
Each voter was offered the experiment form in addition to the regular ballot and asked to fill it out on a voluntary basis. It was also important to ask the voters what they thought of the Third Vote project.
Also ich halte das Experiment für sehr sinnvoll, da die Politiker dann wahrscheinlich mehr auf die Inhalte in ihren Wahlprogrammen eingehen und die dann auch umsetzen werden und nicht so viel Propaganda gemacht wird und falsche Versprechungen. Und ich denke, dass die Wähler dann auch zufriedener werden und die Wahlen vielleicht auch eine größere Anzahl kommen.
Ich weiß jetzt nicht, ob es so schlau ist, jetzt da den Wählern so viele Fragen zu stellen und da auf die Meinung der Wähler zu zählen, die sowieso durch die Parteien schon repräsentiert wird.
Ich halte das Experiment für eine sehr gute Idee. Ich habe mich schon früher gefragt, ob es irgendwie einen Zusammenhang gibt zwischen der politischen Einstellung eines Wählers und halt den Werten, die eine Partei vertritt. Und vor allem im Gespräch mit meinen Großeltern, die schon seit Jahrzehnten die gleiche Partei wählen, habe ich dann irgendwie gemerkt, dass manchmal sie gegen politische Entscheidungen sind, die durchgesetzt worden sind, obwohl das eigentlich genau im Wahlprogramm der Partei stand, die sie gewählt haben.
Ich finde, das Experiment ist aber genau richtig hier, weil die Uni ist einfach ein Ort von Lehre und Forschung und wo soll man sonst ein demokratisches Experiment machen, wenn nicht an der Universität. Und ich finde es super, dass die Studierendenschaft das ermöglicht und das mal ausprobiert, um einfach mal zu sehen, wie das ist, und bin dann mal gespannt, wie die Ergebnisse aussehen auf jeden Fall.
After counting out the votes and running the collected data through a specifically designed MATLAB program for analysis, it was possible to draw the following conclusions. It can be shown that the third vote can in fact improve policy representation of political bodies elected. This was especially true when voters do not consult voting advice applications. The voters who use these tools vote much more consistently with their policy preferences. Here's the result of the student parliament election, based on the 1069 experiment ballots collected by the project team. FIPS was by far the strongest party. Using the voters' responses to the 10 questions making up their third vote, the team examined the popularity indices for the 7 parties running for the student parliament. When looking at the mean indices, it was found that the USO party was the most representative, with a value of 63%. This result is an interesting first experiment, but should not be treated as a final conclusion. During further research on the third vote concept, the following aspects must be reconsidered. The selection criteria for choosing questions for the third vote should be regarded more critically. It is crucial that the choice of questions does not favor any particular party or candidate. The number of questions chosen is also important. Furthermore, it would be worth considering to allow the voters to weight questions to show which issues are most important to them. The mathematics of how the third vote is calculated into the final result of an election also needs further development. The third vote is still in its early stages, but when looking into the future of democracy, the concept could one day be used to improve the representativeness of elected bodies.